Okay, now we're going to get into the contact modalities. So you get the idea that you think that contact modalities are things that are just sort of happening. And what I say in the 70 contact modalities, when I put them all down, they all come to the same thing. Every single one of them is connected to dissociation or trauma. So dissociation is the ability to shut yourself off from your ego mind, to dissociate. And when you dissociate, when you shut down this sort of left side of the brain, then you pop into the field. And everything's in the field, as you'll see. All the material's in the field, all the information's in the field. For example, experiencers, when they did the free survey, 42% of all experiencers say they had scientific, technical, or mathematical material in their head they did not learn in school. Now that they got out of the field. Somehow they tapped into the field and they got this material, which they did not learn in school. And some of this is very complex quantum physics stuff, inventions. There's been a bunch of patents done on this kind of stuff. And the other thing that experiencers talked about in terms of this sort of tapping in is that 40% of all experiencers, if you look at the free survey, and this is 6,000 experiencers who filled out these 600 questions, 40% of all experiencers say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And I talked to a couple of them about this, and I'd say, well, okay, so how long did that last? And they'd say, well, it faded pretty fast, almost like a dream, that within the first day they had forgotten everything that they had learned, but they knew that they knew everything at one point. They knew everything in the universe. And that's the whole idea, that all the information is there, and it's the ability to dissociate and get in the field. And sometimes it's caused by trauma. So people will need this idea now, it's caused by genes. Oh, it's genes that are making you psychic, whatever. Well, we know for a fact that acquired savants, like Orlando Sorrell, had a head injury, get hit with a baseball, and suddenly he starts speaking in a foreign language. He starts speaking in, I think he was speaking Spanish, where suddenly he'd never spoken Spanish, and suddenly he was basically fluent in Spanish just by getting hit in the head with a baseball. So this is the thing with trauma, that a lot of times trauma is causing the person to dissociate. It's shutting down the left brain, and the person suddenly is able to tap into the field and pick up stuff that they normally wouldn't have. So he was 10 years old. He was knocked unconscious by a baseball. Edgar Cayce, the famous psychic, we think, oh, well, you know, he had some sort of genetic thing or whatever, which may be part of it. But basically, Edgar Cayce started when he was a little boy. He tells the story. He was trying to do his spelling, and his father was very upset. He couldn't spell any of the books in the little speller book that he had. And his father got so upset that he hit him across the head and sent him flying off the chair. And he was lying on the floor, and this voice came into his head, which he called it was an angel. And the angel said to him, "If you rest for a second, we will help you." And so he said, "Daddy, Daddy, let me sleep on my spelling book, and I will know all the answers." And so his father allowed him to sleep. He woke up a couple minutes later. And from that time on in his whole life, Edgar Cayce claimed to have the ability to put his head on top of a book and go to sleep, and he would wake up with everything in that book in his head. And he knew every answer in the book. He could spell every word in the book. And the second incident happened when he was playing baseball. He hit with a baseball. That's when he started to be able to channel and say, we have the body. And he would make these readings on the body. We have the body here, do this, do that. So with him, it was 2 trauma events that led to his this ability to be psychic. And to me, it's this trauma thing. It's this shutting down the ego, the rational analytical side that is causing the noise in the signal and allowing you to tap in. Ingo Swann talked about this, the fact that there's noise. And we get into the contact modalities. So the main one that people talk about is meditation. That a lot of times the way you want to tap into the field is you need to learn to meditate. You need to quiet the left side of the brain, not the brain. You need to quiet the left side of the brain. And the EEG research is showing that there's very definite things that are happening in the brain. There are very different brain frequencies that are taking place, and that is actually changing the structure of the brain. Here's this, if you've read the famous book now, this American Cosmic, with this guy, Tyler D. Tyler D talked to me in 2013. He talked to me, he had a number of inventions that he had come up with. And the first one that he told me, the most dramatic one, and this is an experiment they put on the space shuttle, that he had to fight to get it on the space shuttle. They said this is crazy stuff, it wouldn't work. He told me, he said, you know, Grant, the morning I had that idea in my head, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of my bed. And of course I said to him, I said, well, could you see its face? He said, no, I couldn't see its face. So you get this idea that this was not some random thing that his rational analytical brain just sort of put together, analyzed and came up with it. This was something that actually happened to him where he was able to dissociate, and this thing popped in his head, and he's got 40 patents now, has made lots and lots of money from these different patents, and he believes that he can actually tap into the system. And his technique is to sleep. He sleeps 8 hours a night, then he gets up, then he goes back to bed for 1 hour, then he gets up and he goes and sits in the sunlight, and he drinks a large glass of water, and then he can feel that he's tapping into the signal. And that's how he works it. Whereas Whitley Strieber uses a different system. Whitley Strieber and Tyler doesn't drink, and he doesn't drink coffee or alcohol. Whereas Whitley Strieber drinks coffee, and he drinks a little bit of wine in the evening, and he has a shot of hard liquor later in the evening, and he doesn't sleep really at all. He only sleeps for about 4 hours a night. So he's using a completely different, he claims to have a very clear signal. So what I say with all these different techniques are what Bashar calls permission slips. Whatever you think is going to work, if you find something that works for you, whatever that thing is, and you believe it's going to work, that's what taps you in. It's the belief that taps you into the system. So you can be doing different sort of things. It's not like you have to do this, and find and imitate somebody else's system. You got to find a system that you believe will work, and it works. So that's Tyler's system. The other thing that happened with Tyler D is all this happened right after he was good friends with Judy Resnick, who was on the shuttle that blew up. And he was actually at the launch site when she and the other astronauts launched, and he watched this thing explode. And this was his close friend, died right in front of him. And he actually at that point had a divorce, and he had heart problems. He had all sorts of heart issues. And it was at that point when he had this download experience, which again comes to this trauma thing that we say we want to avoid trauma in our life, but a lot of times the trauma is what gets you. It has this side effect where you tap into this field. Hypnosis, 16 to 20 studies show better results when you're doing ESP experiments. We know this, and hypnosis is the same thing. What it is, it's quieting the left side of the brain. You just quiet the brain down, and the left side and the right side is able to tap into this. Dolores Cannon has a technique that she uses for this sort of thing, where she can actually sort of heal people. She can actually go and pull material. And the other thing that's interesting with hers is that it's real time. So she had the one where she had 12 people who had tapped into Nostradamus. And when she was making these conversations with Nostradamus, she said it was happening in real time. That Nostradamus at certain points would say, I gotta go. My wife's cooking dinner, I gotta go. And he would actually leave the session. So it was almost like Nostradamus was alive again, and she was interacting. There was no time and space. So Dolores Cannon has used a lot with this hypnosis thing. And when John Burroughs from Rendell's from Forest, when he did his hypnosis, he had this channeling thing started. He started to channel inside this hypnosis. So hypnosis is one of these things that can sort of open up the channel and allow you to get in. Inner vision process, I'll skip that. Yoga, this is an interesting one, because what I said before was this thing with the temporal and parietal lobes it was discovered, I think it was the University of Pennsylvania, is that if you do yoga and you do meditation at the same time, and when John Burroughs was talked to by Kate Green, he was told to do one type of yoga and one type of meditation. And the University of Pennsylvania seemed to indicate that if you do both these sort of at the same time, you sort of overload the signal to the temporal and parietal lobes, and they shut down. And that's where you get this sort of samadhi experience, where you become sort of telepathic, and you have the noise completely shut off, where you're shutting down these systems. Prayer is a contact modality. It's used all the time. If you take a look at Ray Hernandez's original story, 2012, the guy who started the Free Foundation, with his dog gets healed. he sees it as a UFO experience. His wife is very clear, and I talked to his wife in Florida when I was there. She does not see her experiences as UFO experiences. She sees them as Jesus and God. This is a very religious experience. She's Roman Catholic, and she sees it completely different. So she was praying all night, and the dog got healed. This is a dog that was totally paralyzed. They were going to euthanize it in a couple of hours, and she had was praying, and this dog suddenly revived and lived for a year, totally normal, almost like a puppy for a year. It was like 15 or 16 years old when this incident happened, but she had spent the whole night praying, whereas Ray, when he saw the object, he saw it as a UFO type experience. So basically, you just have different interpretations on this sort of process. The hypnagogic state is very interesting. You have these states, just as you're going to sleep and just as you're waking up, you have these periods of time where you're in the field, where the sort of the noise is shut down and you're able to tap in. And one of the key things that a story that was told by Thomas Edison. So Thomas Edison, there's a statue in the United States, and on that statue you will see on his left hand he's holding a steel ball. The story behind the steel ball was that Edison claimed that he wouldn't really sleep very much at night, maybe 2 hours a night. So he would sit in his lab, he would sit in a chair with arms on it, and he'd hold this steel ball in his hand. And then he would, as he said, he would just sort of meditate. He would just sit there and let his mind wander. And what would happen, he'd have a steel bowl on the floor below his hand. And what would happen is he would sit there and he would fall asleep. And his hand would relax, the steel ball would fall, and it would hit the steel plate and wake him up. And then he would immediately write down what was in his head. So this is hypnagogic and hypnopompic state where you're able to be in that state. So he would go into the state, fall asleep, be immediately woken up, and write down what was in his head. And he had 3,000 books, and he had 2,500 inventions or whatever it was. But when they actually do the statue, they actually have this steel ball. That's why they have a steel ball in his hand. That's how he was getting all these different sort of inventions. A lot of them with when you wake up. I've had these. Frankenstein, the story for Frankenstein came there. Gary Nolan talks about this, and he calls it the little elves, where Gary Nolan from Stanford, the guy who's doing the tests on the human brain, says he goes through all these, and a lot of people will use this process. What you do is you get all what you want to solve, you write it down, you put it beside the bed, you get all these things, and you say, okay, I want this solved. You go to sleep, and a lot of people wake up in the morning and the answer will be in their head, or they'll get the answer within the next day. And Gary Nolan called it the little elves to be working at night. So this is this process of going through the work, gathering all the material, analyzing it, forming the questions, and then allowing the left brain to shut down, which is what happens at night. Your left brain goes quiet. That's why you dream, because that's right brain stuff. You're dreaming, and the left brain is out of the way. The noise is cut down, and the mind can actually get the material. And when it comes back into you in the morning, it's almost like a dream. So when you have a dream, when you wake up in the morning, you have a dream that you want to remember, the key is not to move your body. Do not move anything, even move a finger. Because as soon as you move a finger, if you're going to try to remember what that dream was, or what the invention was, or whatever came to you during the night, as soon as you move a finger, start to move, the left brain starts coming back online. It says, oh, Grant's awake, wake up, let's go. And the filter shuts. The filter is open, it's all there, and you have to write down as fast as you can. Get up and write down what's in your head before the filter shuts, because as the body becomes awake, the left brain comes back online, it shuts down the filter, it creates a lot of noise, and the dream just sort of fades into the dark. So this is this whole process, and that's why I'm saying we're starting to understand how this sort of works. Gansfield experiments, they use this with white noise. And with these ping pong balls, they're able to put these people again. It's to shut this part of the brain, to quiet the noise in the brain. And they've had experiments done with ESP. I've had two. My major download was about 2 years ago with 24 items, and it will become a book. I'll write it in a book. My main one is walking. So what I'll do is I'll walk maybe 10 miles or more a day, and you just walk, and what you're doing is you're quieting the mind. You're just sort of walking, and then all of a sudden it'll come, almost like zoning out when you're driving on a long trip, where you're just sitting there, you're just driving down a long road, and you zone out. Your left brain sort of becomes quiet, and the filter opens up. You tap into the field, and you will get this experience of something from outside yourself, answers coming to different questions. Daydreaming. This is a very important one. A couple of Nobel Prizes came this way. Again, it's shutting the left brain. The laser and the hologram were both invented this way. And Colin Andrews, first I'll tell Colin Andrews' story. Colin Andrews tells the story, and he's famous for the crop circles. He tells the story where he's having a shower. A lot of intuitive experiences come in the shower. And again, this is quieting the rational analytical brain. You're just sitting meditating in the shower, and he had this experience where he's told, it's time for you to come forward. It's time for you to tell your story. And he said, no, I can't do that. And he knew he was to come forward and say that he is actually an experiencer from the time he was a child. He had UFO experiences with beings and stuff since he was a child. He didn't want to come forward, and he's in the shower, and his voice is there. And he said, the voice didn't have to tell me what I was going to do. I knew exactly what it was telling me to do. And I said, no, I don't think I can do that. And then the voice says, no, timing is everything. I think it's time for you to do it. And then he decided he was going to come forward. And that's why he came forward, is because this voice came to his head in a period of quiet in the shower. But the big one here is Charles Townes, who invented the laser, actually sitting on a park bench. So what you do is you gather all the material, you do all the analysis, you work through all your problems or whatever, and then you quiet the brain. So he was sitting on a park bench, and suddenly the whole idea of the laser came into his head, and it came instantaneously. And my download experiences, I know how it works, is that it comes with absolute certainty. It's a different thought. You know this is different. You know you got to write this down. You know this is right. You don't have to analyze this. This is how it works. It comes with this absolute certainty. So he was sitting on a park bench, and you can see they've actually turned the park bench into a sort of a statue where this actual event took place. The other one that was the hologram, and that was, again, the guy had done all the work, and he was sitting on a park bench watching people play tennis, and just sat there quietly, and then boom, the idea came in his head. So daydreaming is a big one, and it's the same sort of thing. It's being able to dissociate, shut down the noise in the left side of the brain, and tap into the field. Trance channeling, I mentioned before, this 40 to 50 hertz gamma, and it's indicative of plasticity, that these people are able to hold this pattern. They're able to train the brain to do this. And the farther you get into field, so you have what are called relay channelers. So you're talking to a being, and you're relaying the information back and forth. Those people are getting a signal, but it's not as good as a trance channeler. A trance channeler is somebody who's actually will not remember anything when they come out of the trance. Whatever the entity is, the being actually takes over the voice, takes over the body, and we're actually going to do a DNA experiment. We're having some trouble trying to get the final end of it done, but we're doing a DNA experiment which goes into trance channeling, which, if it works, and I think it will work, will revolutionize the world. But a trance channeler is somebody where the person's not even there. They are like basically on the sidelines, and another being comes in. And you'll find this with multiple personality disorders, people who have being abused as children. And what happens is the self splits, and all these alters are created with 20 or 30 or 100 different characters that take on the pain of the child, and the child is moved away, and these alters take over. And then it causes a lot of trouble, but they try to put these alters together. But you'll find these things with multiple personality disorder people, and I've talked to at least one of these people, and that you'll find that they have situations where eye color will change, where one of the alters has cancer and the person doesn't have cancer, or vice versa. One has diabetes and the other one doesn't have diabetes. One's a female, one's a male, and you have all these various things. Or the one that I talked to, she said that one of her alters speaks Italian. And I said, well, do you speak Italian? She said, no. And I said, does anybody around you speak Italian? She said, no. But she has an altar. When that altar takes over, that altar speaks Italian. There's one American famous case in America. Somebody ended up in jail. It was stealing. One of the altars was stealing. This guy ended up in jail. But one of his altars could speak complete, fluent, and write in Arabic, and write and read in Croatian. And this guy was an American. So you get these bizarre things that show this sort of paranormal ability to tap in. And it's this dissociation process that you're shutting off, you're dissociating. Remote viewers is again dissociating the left brain thing. And one of the things where I'm talking about this idea where it's not just one section of the brain that's involved in psychic stuff. There's all sorts of sections of the brain, and it's being controlled by the mind on the outside. The brain is just the idiot in between. The top 3 remote viewers in the country are all synesthesias. So they have synesthesia. They see color with people talking, or with sound. They will actually see colors with numbers and stuff like that. So the top 3 have this synesthesia thing going on. And that shows you that it's not just this one part of the brain. There's all sorts of sections of the brain that are involved in this paranormal abilities. Out-of-body experiences is very clear, where you have the out-of-body experience where the person is totally dissociated. They've left the body, they're out of the body. And this Harabantz, who was, his name is Sean Harabantz, he had the same thing where he was able to go out of the body. He was studied at Laurentian University as well. And he also showed this parahippocampal gyrus thing going on. And the other thing that was shown in these experiments at Laurentian University that shows that it's not just a brain section that's taking place. It's the fact that what they found out is what's called Schumann's resonance. And Schumann's resonance is the sort of the resonance of the Earth, of all the frequencies, and 7.83 or 7.81. And that Ingo Swann, when he was on target, he was hitting Schumann's resonance. He was in that 7.83 area. And the same thing with Sean Harabantz. And so the guy who was doing the experiment basically believed that all the material was in the field. And when you got the brain to that frequency, that you could tap into the field. And what they did is they created a headband that would produce the 7.8 frequency. And these people, they would give them targets. It would sit people, and they actually had these students, and they were very accurate at getting psychic, where one would be sitting in a room, and the other one, they'd flash a light, and the person in the other room would know exactly when that person in the other room was seeing the light. So they were doing this thing where they were actually tapping in. And because I'm going to sort of cut this off, so if there's some questions, but the other one that took place is there's a technique called Bankston healing. And I was trained for Bankston healing. And so healing comes into this as well. People who are able to heal. 40% of all experiencers claim they can heal people. 50% of all experiencers claim they were healed by the others, by the phenomena, by something happening in their experience. So you have, when the Bankston method thing came, and what the Bankston method is, when I saw it, the reason I wanted to be trained is because I said, oh, they're shutting down the left brain. The way the Bankston method claims it can cure any type of cancer as long as you haven't had chemotherapy or radiation. It claims it can cure that type of cancer. And what Bankston said is what they're trying to do is get the healer out of the way. The technique was taught to him by a psychic who was able to heal people, who was able to look at a person and actually determine what's wrong with that person just by looking at them. And there's actually a number of UFO experiencer people who can do the same thing. I know a girl who can do this, where she can just take a look at your picture and she can tell you exactly what's wrong with your body. So the guy who the technique was named after is William Bankston, who is actually the president of the Society for Scientific Exploration in the United States, that works on all sorts of studies and peer-reviewed stuff on paranormal phenomena. He's actually the guy who came up with the technique. So what they do is what you do is you take 20 ego images, Now, they don't call them ego, but they are ego images. You can't have an image where I want to save the world or I want to do something nice. It's all ego images. So what you do is you take an image, you say, okay, I want a new car and it's going to be blue and it's going to have this on it, this, and I want a new house and it's going to look like this, and it's going to have 3 bedrooms, and it's going to have, a mountain in the background, and you sort of image all these ego images. And then what you do is you memorize the 20 images, and then you learn to go faster and faster, and you flip these images in your head faster, and they teach you to put them on a wheel, and then you spin the wheel very fast. And the claim is that they can teach you to do 1,000, 2,000 images a second in your head, and you're flipping these images. And I was trained for it, and so I know you can move these images very, very fast. It's just the way they train you to do it. And what you're doing with this thing is you are shutting down the left brain. The ego is very interested. Your left brain is going, oh, look, whoa, look at this motorhome. Whoa, look at the house. And basically what you're doing is you're sending the ego out for coffee. You're distracting it with these images by flipping these images, and you get the healer, the ego out of the way, and then the energy is able to flow through. So when this training took place, I went to Chicago to be trained for this. And every single healer who learns to do this process of shutting down the left brain through these rapid image seconds, it motivates the right brain. So the healing is coming through the right brain, the left brain is out of the way, the healer is out of the way, and it comes through, and the heat comes out of the left hand. So the right brain is what's doing it. It's tapping into the field and whatever, and it's coming through the left hand, which is connected to your right brain. And I was absolutely floored when I went to the training session after the course, and this heat started to come out of my left hand. I was just fascinated by this whole thing. And this concept, if you shut it down, the healer, get the healer out of the way, the energy can flow through. And what they discovered when they did the brain research on this was that Bankston was going into a Schumann's resonance, the same as Ingo Swann, the same as Sean Harabantz. He was going into a Schumann's resonance, but he was going into a triple harmonic. So he was 7.83, 15 point whatever, and 22. He was hitting this triple Schumann's resonance in his brain, and they were picking this up and they were recording it. And what they found out was that the person that he was healing at one point for a couple of seconds during the healing, the person that was being healed his brain would go into exactly the same frequency, would match the 2 brain frequencies at one point, would be exactly the same with this triple harmonic of Schumann's resonance. And that's when they believed the healing would take place. At that moment, when the 2 brains linked up, and that's when the energy would move. The other thing that we know from the research done by Sean Harabantz was this guy who was able to read people. He could sit in front of you and he could tell you everything about yourself. What they found out when they wired those people and they checked their brains was exactly the same thing, that Sean Harabantz's brain was in this Schumann's resonance, and that the brain of the person who was being read by Sean Harabantz would also go into this Schumann's resonance. They would link up and the brain patterns would be exactly the same. So this is what you see when you start looking at these different modalities. And here we have dreams. Here's okay. Let me give you an example of the dream thing. I'm going to show you a couple videos and then I'll stop. Okay, the one first one I want to do is people think the inventions are coming by people who are doing rational analytical thought. One of the key inventions of the 20th century was the invention of Google search. Here is the guy who invented Google telling you where Google came from. And you're going to see this whole idea. It came from a dream. It came from when his left brain was shut down and his right brain was tapped into the field, and he got the idea for Google. And here he is at a lecture, at a commencement, and he's talking about this.
I have a story about following dreams. Or maybe, more accurately, it's a story about finding a path to make those dreams real. You know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night with a vivid dream? And you know how if you don't have a pencil and pad by the bed, it will be completely gone by the next morning. I had one of those dreams when I was 23. When I suddenly woke up, I was thinking, what if we could download the whole web and just keep the links? And I grabbed a pen and started writing. Sometimes it's important to wake up and stop dreaming. I spent the middle of that night scribbling out the details and convincing myself it would work. Soon after, I told my advisor, Terry Winograd, it would take a couple of weeks for me to download the web. He nodded knowingly, fully aware it would take much longer, but wise enough not to tell me.
Okay, psychics, I'm going to quickly go through these. Psychics, mediumship, same thing. It's dissociating. DID, I was talking about these split personalities. Psychedelics. Most people say when you take these high dose psychedelics, the ego is crushed, that's left brain, and you suddenly realize that everything is alive and conscious. That's right brain. That's the samadhi experience of the parietal lobe being shut down. Chanting, automatic writing, it's the same thing. There's some who are good, some are even better at it. It's the ability to dissociate. It's used by the Mission Rama people who have these portal experiences where I was linked to them. Francis Swan, who was advising the Canadian government, was using this process. The Canadian government was actually tracking everything that she was saying. Wilbur Smith, the guy around the Canadian government program, and his wife were doing automatic writing. Breathing, they found that out through LSD. When people were coming out of LSD, that they would do this rapid breathing thing to try to stay in the trance. And so they just did the rapid breathing, and they could reproduce the LSD experience without doing the LSD. They could do it just through breathing. So you can use breathing, telepathy. This is a video. Is the audio coming through on that other video? Can someone give me a signal whether it's coming through? Because this,
the one with the Google, the audio came through. Yes.
Okay, good. Because I want to. There's a couple more videos. I want to make sure you're getting the audio. This is an incredible one. This is you have people, and I did this in my book, Inspired, where you have these savants, and savants, most of them have left brain damage. You'll see they can't talk. This girl here is from the United Arab Emirates. She's not able to talk. She has to use a little pad to punch out words and stuff like that. Will flip out. These autistic children will flip out. Anything gets changed in the room, they just absolutely can't handle any sort of change. She was like basically totally telepathic, this girl. Now, the problem is there's no money to research these kids. There's a bunch of these kids around, and the left brain is basically almost shut down, and the right brain is going at 100 miles an hour, and they're able to do mathematical calculations. They're able to do all these weird things. So I'm going to show you a couple of these to show you what happens, how amazing it is if you can actually completely shut the left brain down, what you can do. So this girl was totally telepathic. The other one I'm going to show you a video now is from Diane Powell, and she works with these autistic children. And she had one called Haley. I'm going to show you a video here of Haley. She's at the time, she was 11 years old. And the way they discovered that she was telepathic was that one of her sort of people that takes care of her during the day, one of the nurses that took care of her, she suddenly got the impression that Haley was reading her mind. So she said to her, she said, "How do you say I love you in German?" And Haley went on her little punch pad and she punched in the German words as to I love you in German. And this woman was just floored. So they started to go and they went to Diane Powell, and Diane Powell started to work with this girl. Now, the video I'm going to show you here is Diane was trying to raise money to do a study of this girl, and she wasn't able to raise the money. And that's the problem in the UFO community and in the parapsychology world, is that people like it. It's interesting stories. Everybody likes to hear the stories. But when it comes down to actually putting up money and researching this stuff, there really isn't that much support. So Diane was not able to get any money to research this girl. But this girl was famous for hitting 162 numbers in a row right. So they would give her these numbers. I'm going to show you, I think, an 18-digit segment that she does on camera. And she would do all these. And then at the end of 162, Diane said, "You've got 7 wrong." And Haley immediately started to punch in the numbers again. And the second time she got them all right. So this is basically pure telepathy. And if we can learn to do this, and if we can study these kids, we can learn what's going on. I'm saying the left brain is shut down. The signal is completely clear. She's picking a complete clear signal. There's no noise in her signal. And so here, what you're going to see on the screen, they have to build a dividing wall between her and the handler. So you're going to see the handler on the right-hand side who is moving this board across this divider to her. to try to get this. And it took them a long time because she got upset about this divider being there, and then finally calmed her down. So here's the video of her doing a mathematical calculation that her handler is looking at it on a pad, and Haley is punching into this key punch thing. She can't speak. She's punching into this key punch thing, and then there's a little tiny screen where she puts it into she punches it into a little screen. So here's a girl, left brain completely shut down, doing telepathy.
The people that would be most likely to exhibit it would be nonverbal autistic children. And it turns out that I might be right. The video you're looking at shows the experimental setup we had last spring. Haley, a 10-year-old severely autistic child, and her therapist are seated alone in the room, together at a table and separated by a tall partition that prevents eye-to-eye or physical contact. Cards with randomized numbers, words, sentences, pictures, and equations were hidden until the experiment. The therapist viewed them one by one on her side of the visual barrier and then asked Haley what she was thinking or looking at. Haley pointed with her wooden pencil inside characters on stencils with her right hand to select them, and then entered them with her left into a device that converts text to speech. You'll notice that there are no characters for division signs, equal signs, or decimal points, so the therapist had to tell Haley when these occurred. You'll also notice that her answer is 100% accurate on 18 out of 18 digits. This is just one of 10 equations that she did in a 10-minute period, with accuracy above 90% each time.
Okay, this is rapid image cycling. I want to get to one more video and then I'm gonna shut it down. But koans is one I just suddenly realized. This is this idea that in the Eastern traditions where you give the left brain a bizarre problem. What's the sound of one hand clapping? These are called koans. And so the Eastern traditions use this to shut the left brain down. It gives the left brain some stupid problem to work on. And the egoic mind sort of, or what Dolores Cannon used to call Mr. Stupid, goes to sleep. Frequencies are used, music, drumming, binaural beats, putting in one frequency in one ear, another frequency in the other ear will cause this dissociation. Forced disassociation, abuse and trauma, very common. There's a study done with Brazilian mediums where vast majority of them had childhood abuse issues. So they're trying to shut out the physical world as children. They're being abused and they disassociate and suddenly they're talking to their dead grandmother. These are the Brazilian mediums. Epilepsy, I think it was one of the top parapsychologists, his name is escaping me right now, Stanley Krippner, stated that he had almost every shaman he'd ever met in his life had an epilepsy. So this is the idea that you have this epilepsy thing, and the brain is sort of allowing you to tap into this field. Synesthesia, alien abduction. One of the things I'm starting to think now, 39% of all people who've been on board the ship will talk about the screen. They're showing this horrible screen image of the world being destroyed, of floods, all this kind of stuff. And I always ask them, why do you think they're showing you the screen? And they say, I think they're testing my my emotions. And I think the aliens know about emotions. They don't need to test you for emotions. I think one of the things they may be doing with this screen is giving you a message, number one, that we're destroying the world, and number two, they're helping you to dissociate. It's like a trauma thing where they're forcing the person to dissociate, and that makes them more psychic, because there's a huge percentage of experiencers who've been on board the ship who are psychic. They're healers. They have these abilities, and you only get these abilities, I maintain, by dissociation. So the aliens may be doing this kind of dissociation thing. Fever, the whole thing with the survival of the fittest. Darwin grabbed it, plagiarized it, ran off with it, but it was actually Wallace who came up with the idea of the survival of the fittest, and he got it during a fever. in 1858 and wrote a letter to Darwin, and Darwin took the idea and ran with it. But the idea came during a fever. Pain is a lot of people, pain is used. People who have that, fasting, vegetarianism, lack of sleep will cause dissociation, sensory deprivation, brain injury, that's Haley, or people, Edgar Cayce, people in Vietnam, the guys who they had looking for the mines were people that had injuries. Brain disease, injuries. Peter Hurkos, one of the top psychics of all time, fell off a ladder, became very psychic. Blind Tom was a brain where he was born with a brain disability. He was one of these sort of savants. He was maybe one of the two mega savants. And his favorite feat is, I always quote this, his favorite feat, he was able to play Yankee Doodle in B flat with his right hand, play Fisherman's hornpipe in C with his left hand while singing early in the morning, and do all three at the same time. So you see these savants have these unbelievable abilities. Here's the one I want to show you. And this shows, again, the right brain, left brain thing. This is dissociation. I believe these are what are called the Sachs twins. They're from the 1960s. They're brothers. These were boys who were able to do, savants have a bizarre love of prime numbers. And these guys were able to do 15 and 16 digit prime numbers. One give one, and then the next one give, what's the next prime number? And they'd go back and forth. And at that time, there was not even an algorithm for a computer to figure out prime numbers that were that big. And these kids were, so they couldn't even check whether these kids were actually given the correct prime numbers. But here you're going to see a video of these two kids, and give you the backstory on this whole thing. The left brain is what does basic calculation. The right brain, so you get a lot of these savants are able to do massive mathematical calculations in their head. And you're going to see these kids, most savant people have this obsession with calendar calculating. So you're going to see they're going to give them these dates in the future, and they're able to tell you exactly what date of the week is. So you immediately imagine that these kids are calculating, that they have some sort of process in their head that they're figuring out mathematically what date that's going to be. So then you're going to see that they're going to actually go and they're going to ask them some basic mathematical questions. And what you see is the left brain is completely shut down. The left brain cannot answer a basic mathematical question. And yet the right brain is picking up all this stuff, has total memorization of anything that's happened. And it shows the ability, if you can shut down. And again, these are autistic kids. They have language problems, problems of buttoning their shirts and stuff like that. So here's them doing this calendar calculating, and then you're going to see where they go into this left brain thing and they start asking them basic questions about calculating.
It's July 19th, the year 92,000. July 19th, 92,000? 860. 92,860. That would be 92,860. July 19th? Right, July 19th. That will be on July 18th, 92,840.60. That will be on a Monday. All right. Now, July 19th, the year 132,470. Figure this one out. July 19th, that will be on a Saturday. Saturday. All right. Now, I want to ask some other questions. Yeah. How many days in a year? 365. Is it more than 365 or exactly 365? I believe it's 366. 366. Leap year. All right. How many days in a week? 307. How many months in a year? 12. How many hours in a day? 24. How many minutes in an hour? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. How many seconds in a minute? 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Sure it's not more than 10? I'm sure. Sure. All right. How much is 4 times 7? 4 times 7, I don't know. You don't know? No, but there's 4. Bride taught you for months. Remember? You remember when McBride brought you? Yeah. What day was that he brought you on? That's in 1964. 64. What month? In February. What ward? Ward 5. Right. Now, 4 times 7 is how much? It's 21. 21. Couldn't be more? Couldn't be more.
So there you see that they're not able. Here's a Daniel Tammet. He's a savant. He does calculations. He's able to sort of elaborate what's happening in his brain more than these other kids are. So what he says is when he gets a calculation, he's got synesthesia. So he sees everything as colors and shapes. So he gets 53. He knows what the shape of 53 is. He knows what the shape of 131 is. And he says that when he puts the two numbers in his head, he just sits and waits for the shape in between to appear. And the shape in between, he knows what the number is. And the shape will tell him what the answer is. He does no calculation, whatever. He just sits and waits for the shape to appear in his head and knows what number that shape is. And here's what it looks in colors. He's describing the colors of these different numbers. That's the way he sees it in his head. The biggest mega savant of all times was the guy who did the Rain Man, Kim Peek. 12,000 books he memorized. He could tell you what was on every single page, and totally memorized 12,000 books. And he had no corpus callosum. He had a lot of problems, but his brain was totally at work. He was able to do this. This would be my last video. He was able to do, if you saw the Rain Man, he did the thing with the toothpicks, and it was actually done in real life. It was actually matchsticks, but this is a story in the Rain Man, the show where she drops the toothpicks, and he's able to go 80, 82, 82, 82, 246. He's able to, as the toothpicks hit the floor, he can tell you how many toothpicks there are. Now, to show you that we can actually now control this sort of thing, this is done in Australia. What they do is they magnetically stimulate the left side of the brain. So what they do is they're shutting down the left side of the brain. And what they want to do is recreate savant abilities, these abilities to do prime numbers, to do calendar calculation, all this kind of stuff. And what they do is the idea with the matchsticks. So what they do, you're going to see on the video here, is they show this person how many dots are on the screen. They show it for 1 second, and it may have 100 dots or 150 dots on the screen. And you are to say within 1 second how many dots are on the screen. So they magnetically stimulate the brain for 15 minutes, and then they do it again. And it's completely, these guys are able to basically tell you how many dots are on the screen, and all they're doing is they're shutting down the left brain. So here's this video.
Right. Again, I'm going to show you, as before, a number of dots on the screen, and I want you just have a moment to look at them, and I want you to tell me how many you see.
When he first tried to count the dots, Mike seemed hesitant, but after a dose of magnetic stimulation, his responses are more confident.
103. 110. 62.
Okay, so before the transcranial magnetic stimulation, you got 2 out of 20, which is very typical. That's about what most people get. But in your case, quite astonishingly, after TMS, you got 8 out of 20, which is better than our average.
Death is a very traumatic incident. I did a study before I got into UFOs on dying people in hospitals. You look there, you see life review. A lot of people report life reviews. Gene Houston, who's famous for being the spiritual advisor to Hillary Clinton, or there's a claim at the time, ran the Foundation for the Mind Research in New York, Human Potential Movement. She describes her enlightening experience as jumping out of a plane at 17 years old with a parachute, and the parachute didn't open, and she immediately entered a serenity, found myself in a life review, and basically like a near-death experience. Next thing she realized, she was on the ground, the parachute had opened, but there was just basically the fear and the trauma of suddenly realizing your parachute's not opening, and she goes into this life review. So it's a trauma thing. Near-death experiences. Joe McMonagle, one of the top remote viewers of all times, has a near-death experience, and that's when he becomes psychic. And you'll see this over and over again. People who have near-death experiences or become mediums, they'll have a traumatic operation, or they'll have a near-death experience, and they suddenly become psychic. Flatline, that means the near-death experience, people will say your brain is creating your experiences, but when you have a lot of these near-death experiences, there's a flatline, EG, and basically the person is saying the experience is more real than the real world. It's actually a more real experience, which shows that the reality is outside, that all the bubbles are gone, all the smoke is gone, you're getting a clear signal. And people who have near-death experiences, or people who have lucid dreams, or people who do psychedelics will tell you the experience was more real than the real world. This world we live in is the dream. That's what they will tell you. Near-death experiences, terminal lucidity, where people who have Alzheimer's, haven't spoken for years, will have this period of 5 minutes, an hour, whatever, where they suddenly become totally lucid. Their brain is completely gone, eaten away by Alzheimer's, and they will suddenly become totally lucid. They remember everything, they can talk to everybody, and then within a few minutes or hours, they die. Pre-death visions, my father had one of these before he died. And this is this trauma thing, death predictions I found in my study in the 1970s. Lots of people will tell you that when they're in the hospital, they could actually tell a doctor, today is the day I'm going to die. And they're usually right. Clock stopping, there's lots of incidents of clock stopping when people die. Seances, so I'm going to go through the last one. Seances, hypnotic regression is a modality. Face-to-face aliens meet with us, a contact modality would actually meet with us face-to-face. You have ghosts. You have shamanism as a contact modality where people are able to go into the field. Pre-birth memories, the Moody Blues, remember before they were born that they were going to be on Earth, they were going to put messages in the music. Newton regressions, the life between life stuff. Sightings, this is what I say a lot of what UFO stuff is. It's just a contact modality. They're not really flying anywhere. The reason they have lights on the craft is they want you to see them. It's a contact modality. They're just flying around so you can see them. The religious phenomena is the same thing. Crop circles, the reason they're putting down crop circles is a contact modality. They're contacting us. They're giving us messages. Synchronicities is a contact modality. Apports, I maintain all the metal stuff that you're seeing now, all these different pieces of metal. I will maintain that they are being dropped off by the aliens just to get across a message. They're going to be very bizarre, but they really aren't part of ships. They're more like apports. A lot of people use radio, phone. This has been used in the past to make contact with aliens. So the aliens are using that as a contact modality. Infrared, the stuff at the Skinwalker Ranch, that's when they saw the portal was through infrared. They picked up the infrared. And again, it's just more information than the brain is giving you. The brain is telling you there's nothing there, but when you use an infrared camera or something, it gives you something that shows you, no, your brain is not right. There's actually something there. Television, Colin Andrews had this very bizarre experience with the TV where it shuts down. Millions of people in Great Britain are watching this signal of an alien for about 6 minutes talk on the TV. That happened. Colin taped that whole thing. Tools, and this is where I'll sort of end it. A lot of what you'll see of people are using are tools through contact modalities. All they are is tools. So this octopus thing people put on the head that creates this Schumann's resonance thing. Ouija boards, that's a tool. It's like a permission slip. You have these ones, and I had one actually with a producer out of Toronto who told me just a bizarre story where they'd built this sort of a Ouija board for alien stuff. And she told this bizarre story of this being talking to her and knowing her name is Teza, but the alien said, I want to talk to Nanteza. And nobody in the room knew who it was. And she said, that's me. And this being was talking to her through this sort of like an Ouija board they built for aliens, but it's just a contact modality. It's not really doing anything. It's your belief or your ability to sort of dissociate, and you're using this tool to help you dissociate. Brain stimulation, I showed you before. Spirit boxes are used to make this contact. Tape recorders, people use to pick up spirit communications. Dowsing is a tool that's used. Sigils, magic sigils are used, crystal balls, tarot cards, tea leaves, coffee grounds, animal bones, oil, black mirrors, blood, all this stuff. It's all the same thing. It's just a tool that people are using. These things where you can talk to dead people, mental projections, Philip the Ghost, where they actually created a ghost in Toronto, all these sort of things. Now, possible explanations, we'll leave that for a future lecture or whatever, but I basically maintain that we all have the ability to tap into the field. And the more we learn and watch the people who are in the field and people who are having the contact modalities, we see certain patterns that show us exactly what is happening. And I say it's going to be either dissociation or trauma that is allowing the person to dissociate. So the beings, the spirits, they live in that field. They can come into this field because they don't have this left brain problem. They can come into the world, they can materialize, they can talk to us, whatever, they can go back into the other world. Our problem is we think that we only live in this physical world. There is no world out there. The world is out there. We are living in a dream here. So I'm going to leave it at that. And if anybody has a question or whatever, or if you want to shut it down, we'll leave it at that. That's the sort of the latest research I'm doing. And I think this actually leads to the answer of what's actually going on, why the beings are here, what messages they're leaving us, and what we can learn from people who are interacting with the phenomena. You can never learn anything about what UFOs are about by watching stuff fly around in the sky, by looking at metal. The only way you're going to learn what's actually going on is to talk to the people who are interacting with the phenomena. And those people are using contact modalities, different contact modalities to make that contact. Thanks.
Thank you, Grant. It's been